how you could have had such an upbringing of scarcity and how you became a leader with such a mindset of abundance.
Fair warning, man, emotions are data, and this stuff tends to get a little emotional for me.
I saw my parents working really, really hard for not much money. I was like, I'm never going to be a teacher. I am going to succeed and live a different life.
So when Meg thinks something is wrong or stupid, Meg will say, this is wrong or stupid, or we should do this. When Amy thinks what you're doing is wrong or stupid, she will stop and look at you and go, well, that's it. That's the entire conversation.
I have this background of like, it'll all work out.
Half the time I'm like, okay, what would Amy Wilson do?
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Thank you so much for the support for our show. Please do like and subscribe and add comments. We would love to hear from you and what you'd like to see more of on the show. Hey Meg, what's up?
Oh my goodness, back in the Bay Area just in time for the rains to happen. So
the atmospheric river is in effect.
Exactly. But it is nice to sleep in your own bed again and catching up and all of that.
Good.
So yeah.
Do you want to share with everyone where you've been?
Where the heck have I been? Yeah, so the last couple weeks did a trip to Asia, joined Jerry Crispin's group that went to Vietnam. And we went there to talk with business leaders in Vietnam and learn what we could about what HR was like in Vietnam, what work is like in Vietnam, all of that. So it was a nice combination of traveling to a place I've never been and learning. And then I spent a couple days on the way back in Hong Kong, which was both for personal joy. I've never been there, but also part of my challenge myself to learn to navigate places that I've never been
on
before.
Your own.
On my own, yes. So, and as you can imagine, I made it back successfully and had a few interesting moments. So,
yeah. Well, so what did you learn in Vietnam?
So first off, I think it's useful to kind of ground in context. So, you always learn things that are a little bit outside of what you expected to learn. So I knew going in, because of course I'm a researcher, Vietnam's, experiencing a lot of growth, has had a lot of industry growing in. They're very big in agriculture. They're also big in manufacturing, have spent a lot of time in the garment and clothing area, and are moving into more high tech. Definitely all of that proved true. We got to talk to business leaders in a range of industries, so that really helped. And one of the things that I learned was just, how the world looks different and how your assumptions are so different when you're standing in a different seat and experiencing a different starting point. So, of course, Vietnam had a very tumultuous series of wars, and we all kind of have our own understanding of that. But the rebuild process has been pretty successful. And what I found particularly interesting is just, again, unsurprising, the creativity and the resilience of this particular workforce. So the questions they wanted to talk about were all of the greatest hits around AI, but were also a lot about carbon emissions. They've got some pretty stiff expectations for their own net zero goals. I will tell you that true to stereotype, there was a lot of picture taking, like a crazy amount of picture taking. We would take pictures at the beginning of the meeting with everyone, and then we'd get pictures at the end of the meeting with everyone. And then people wanted to do like individual pictures. I don't know where all these pictures are going. I'm probably going to be famous forever.
It's the new version of card swapping?
Yes, yes. Much less, I even printed up business cards, much less interest in business cards, so much interest in photos. But my favorite story was we were trying to leave an event and we were getting on an elevator. The elevator was small, didn't fit too many people. So we had to get multiple rounds of people down this elevator. And they literally came and pulled us back off the elevator to take more photos. So it was like, oh my goodness, I have never. So yeah, I don't know what
It's a good thing you did all of your like photo boot camping.
That is exactly right. And all of the posing research I've done on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very did you get any you need to smile mores?
I think that was implied. Also got to teach the rest of the delegation, how to do the Asian heart. I guess that was new for them. So
that was new for them.
Yes. So yeah.
Oh, you are the American delegation. You're saying.
Correct.
Not the Asian. Okay.
Yeah. No. They kept trying to tell everybody to do it, and the rest of the delegation was like, "What?" And I was like, "Hold my beer. I'm the Korean drama watcher." So yeah, I got that one. So I now sort of mentally categorize Asia to chaotic Asia and orderly Asia, and what I mean by that is very specifically, what does it mean to cross the street? And what does it mean to be a pedestrian in the culture? So Vietnam falls on the India, Cambodia side, which I put in the chaotic Asia, which means that I do not feel personally qualified to cross the street.
All right. So we have so much to talk about, but I have a couple more things. So the first thing, or the second thing, I guess, is that I have a new guilty pleasure.
Ooh,
that
tell
I
me.
wanted to share. Well, our friend Marnie, our good friend from SAP, she has started a podcast with her friend, and they review a documentary. And they promise no facts or truth, but they are delightfully Minnesotan.
So cool.
Which, my mom grew up in Minnesota. I was born in Minnesota, so I have a lot of Minnesotan relatives with that beautiful accent, and they're just so fun. So if you have spare time for a guilty pleasure, do tune in. They've reviewed that Catfish one and the Biggest Loser documentary and the Fire Festival and all sorts of them. Yeah.
And the name of the podcast?
It's called The Gist Project.
Ooh, yeah. I like it. I like it.
All right. And then the third thing that I wanted to tackle before we get into our big topic is our friend Sangeet Paul Chowdhury, who we had on the show a couple months ago, posted an interesting thing on LinkedIn. He was talking about how he sees that there's a strange idea going around about how HR and IT should merge, and we should be treating AI agents like workers. And he thought that this was a terrible idea because AI agents should be thought of as capital assets and rather than operating expenses. And so we should not be thinking of them in this way. And I thought that was so interesting because, of course, we talked with Sangeet at length. And at the same time, we also have talked about the concept of AI agents as workers. And so he was definitely contradicting a lot of the things that we've been saying. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Meg, on this topic and like how to unpack it a little bit and where we were wrong or where we want to stick in our heels. What do you think?
Yeah. So first off, one of the things that I like about the way that Sangeet looks at the world is, with a very systems thinking lens. And so when I read this, first off, I loved the fact that he just drew it right back to capital allocation, because if you talk to any board member, that's what we talk about. I think to remind our listeners a little bit that capital allocation is just a fancy way to talk about where are you investing and why are you investing? I think something that gets a little easier if you think in terms of robotics, right? So just setting aside AI agents, and we'll come back to it. If you think in terms of where we have shifted from humans to machines And maybe the most recent Amazon layoff is a really good one because they're using a lot of robotics in their warehouses. It's easy to understand that you're dealing with the trade-offs of automation, how we should think about the investment side. What's big about this idea is it suggests that you need to think big, and you need to think in terms of something that you would pay off over a long period of time versus something incremental. I think where it gets more nuanced is the fact that these agent side taking on tasks, doing work, starts to look a little bit different than robotics in several use cases, and much more as task completion type activities. And I think in those cases, all of the things that we've discussed, which is what about oversight, who's responsible.
I think a point that you're making too is that like a lot of it is like kind of micro tasks too. So it's very embedded in the workflow rather than like, a machine that's at least in the current times, right? At some point, AI agents might do like a whole lot all at once, but in the current time, it's very much like incorporated into a human workflow where there's humans and agents together, and how they're interacting and who's doing what. So there's a lot of like coordination between humans and AI agents that needs to be managed.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I think here's where it gets really interesting. I think we lump all of this together in this like enthusiasm and conversation around AI. And I actually think we're having multiple conversations here, which is truly about so many parts of work and of kind of like the foundations of our economy are ripe for change here.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be not at all common to have like this one leader that he was saying he's hearing about, but I think that there will be some cases, but it's a very specialized skill set, a very special kind of person that kind of see across all those things.
I think no matter how you look at it, like your job has an opportunity to get bigger or smaller, but staying the same is not going to happen.
Yeah. And then the last thing about the post that I found just absolutely hysterical was the irony of him arguing that they need to be thought of as assets and capital, and how the HR community has been arguing for the last 30 years that people should be considered capital assets in companies. So anyway, I thought that was a very funny parallel. The main topic that I wanted to discuss today was actually inspired by the personal story that you shared in a recent Insight Loop. So for those of you who don't know, Meg regularly, maybe once every couple weeks.
Yeah, it's a bi-weekly, but sometimes more.
She posts a newsletter that includes a roundup of all of the things she read, which is absolutely disturbing, with some commentary, some overarching commentary, and then some individual commentary. It's really quite a special sponge experience. But anyway, so Meg's recent story was she was talking about her upbringing, and I think you were triggered, Meg, a little bit by recent events with the lack of funding to SNAP programs, and that brought up some childhood memories. And the story that you shared reminded me how much I've always been wondering how you could have had such an upbringing of scarcity and how you became a leader with such a mindset of abundance. So I wanted to tackle that a little bit today. And then I thought it would also be fun to compare and contrast a little bit with my upbringing, which was not quite so hardshipy, though it had its moments. And then, it's always fun to talk about our similarities and differences and the tensions and kind of the superpowers and blind spots that we have. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. Fair warning, man, emotions are data, and this stuff tends to get a little emotional for me, but we will do our best and see if we can balance it out with dark humor, which I realized recently is related.
Yeah. Well, I will tread carefully. Um, okay, so first of all, you shared in your piece a little bit about how you experienced two realities. One was some of the evangelical leanings that you were having as a young person attached to adults that decided to go in that direction. And then the other were, working class values. So I wanted to better understand kind of those two realities for you and how those were formative.
Yeah, so I tried to frame this a little bit that I don't think it's completely unusual for children of divorce to experience contexts that are very different as their parents diverge. And so, my parents divorced before I was a year old. And so my entire life that was the norm, that, you had like one experience with one parent and another experience with another parent. I also happen to have like two parents that, again, typically the divergence tends to happen as life does. There's a reason people come together and reasons that they split apart. But I also think that, I had a very sort of different humans in my parents, where my dad you would describe as kind of a consistent and even keel, and my mom you would describe as very high fluctuation. Jumped into a lot of new things with 2 feet, and then changed and changed again. I think my dad even reflected once that, like, because of that sort of, you've got one sine wave kind of like going up and down, and then you've got one straight line going straight. At some point they intersect, and that seems like they make sense together, and that's what maybe how their relationship happened. And then eventually you realize, wow, this is like we're not compatible people. So I think that while most children of divorce, especially when it happens when you're young, do experience like that, those sort of different worlds, mine was probably maybe outsized because of these experiences. And so, yeah, what I tried to describe more than anything was that how those different realities took me a long time to kind of understand to their fullness, because, and maybe I haven't even fully gotten there, but recognizing that living two realities and having them be so different worldview wise.
How would you describe the two worldviews in a nutshell?
I don't know. There is a nutshell, but I will say, so as it relates to social assistance and poverty in particular, I would describe my dad's worldview as being against any kind of social assistance.
That's the working class values. Yeah.
That is, yes, that is how I would describe it. Now there's a working class represents a lot of people with a lot of different views, but his point of view was that was a character failing to participate in social assistance. Were responsible for yourself and your family and all of that. And so when things got hard, you just worked harder.
You worked hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, but at the same time, you did require food stamps and other assistance as you were growing up.
I never told my dad that.
He never knew. Okay.
Well, he might have suspected, but I was very careful to.
Got it. But there was that social net of your father's parents.
Correct.
So there was kind of he did have a bit of a backstop there, right?
Yes. And union wages were a workable thing in general. Mm-hmm. So, but there was a period when I was young where my dad had a roommate with 3 sons. So there were 5 kids and 2 adults, in a very, very small.
And that's when you refer to being raised by wolves, I think, right?
Correct. Correct. And I was the littlest, so you can imagine
Yeah.
3 boys and then 2 girls, with me being, this would probably be age like 2 to 4. So yeah, very formative. But that's, that's how my dad made through,
Right.
when things were
And
difficult.
then, like, in comparison, then the evangelical worldview, what was the feeling about assistance and poverty
Yeah,
and that
it
kind of
didn't
thing?
come up as much at the beginning. And again, the arc of childhood goes through phases as well. But so my mom and stepdad had a business. It was a carpet cleaning business. They were, my language, terrible entrepreneurs. They struggled a lot on all the dimensions of being a business owner. And what I didn't understand initially, but did become very clear later, is they made do by not paying taxes. And that doesn't pay off in the end. If
Yeah.
anybody doesn't understand how the IRS compounds interest of back taxes,
But they gave their money to the church, though, yeah?
they gave the money to the church all the time. Yes, yes. And insisted we went to private school so that we could avoid any secular influence and all of that. So yeah, very, very complicated situation.
So you were fighting for attention on the one side with the House of Wolves, and then on the other side you had kind of this like weird evangelical thing going on, and you were navigating a difficult stepfather too, right?
Yes, you got exposed to a lot of different personalities, different risks of personalities. I would definitely describe my stepdad as a very angry, very volatile person, but also a very charismatic person, like super. It was the first time I truly understand what charisma looked like, where people were really drawn to him. And so the cognitive dissonance of that, somebody who was like super pedestaled by other people, but also a little bit volatile and bordering on violent, was, that was a learning as well, I guess. So navigating that kind of complexity, as well as just the differences, again, like, what was okay to share with my dad and my grandparents about what was happening in my life versus what was okay to share with my evangelical parents about what was happening at the grandparents' house. Like there was just a lot of compartmentalization.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
You had
yeah.
a lot of, yeah, complex processing to
Yes. And
manage.
then the other bit was the moving all the time. And that was mostly financially driven, but we moved. I changed schools almost every year, sometimes multiple times in a year. And so just that, like picking up and going to a new context and trying to figure out how to navigate that. I think, yes, there was a lot of,
You would think that you would navigate the subway system in Hong Kong better as a result, Meg.
well, again, the subway, I killed the subway. Let's be very
Okay.
clear. The
Sorry,
subway
their stairwell system,
The
let's say.
subway has signs and letters and names. It's so lovely. I could spend forever in a subway, but you get me out on a regular street and it gets a little
Okay.
bit harder.
All right. So one other thing that caught my eye was in your article was that you never identified with poverty until your college applications, despite the fact that you were
Yeah, all evidence to
using
the
food
contrary.
stamps, government cheese,
Right,
and a lot of the moving was to,
right.
avoid,
Afraid to ask for something if something was broken or needed to be
yeah,
fixed because you didn't want to be a burden. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right.
all of that
So
stuff.
why do you suppose that is?
I'm not sure if it was delusional or if it was kind of an awareness of the backstop of, well, like if things got really bad, I could call the grandparents in for a favor or whatever. But there was, like, again, sort of back to the kind of the weight of poverty. Like, I remember we moved my senior year and we moved to a bigger school, and I was reluctant to try out for the volleyball team because in order to try out, you had to get a $20 physical to say that you were qualified. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'll make the team, and I can't afford to waste $20.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't fully appreciate, and I truly do, is the reality of so many different contexts, and also the reality of nobody's really going to come save you, was overwhelming in childhood and super helpful in adulthood.
That sets a nice foreshadowing for the future Meg that we'll talk about in a minute. So is it okay if we talk about me now?
Yes, please. For the love of God, let's talk about you.
So my childhood was kind of like the complete opposite in many respects. There certainly was a lack of money. Like, my upbringing was not in any ways wealthy and abundant. However, it was extremely stable, like crazy stable. And starting at about age 5. So prior to age 5, it was a little rocky because my dad decided to take 7 years to get his PhD. Once my dad got his PhD and he got a tenure track professor job, my mom was also a teacher. She taught math and then chemistry in high school. So I was a teacher's kid, and from the age of 5 until I graduated high school, I was in the same school system.
Did you ever have your mom for a teacher, or did any of your friends have your mom?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah. That would have
been hard, yeah.
So extremely stable. My parents were, very quiet and kind of contained people, like almost hermits to some extent. So I was an only child, so I was alone a lot. So I had a lot of opportunity to explore creative endeavors and be in my own head and all that kind of stuff. I was, never had to fight for anything. Like, I was always the center of everything, I guess. There was tons of support for me. I was very well cared for. But at the same time, like, I saw my parents working really, really hard for not much money. And so that was pretty formative for me. I was like, I'm never going to be a teacher. I'm never going to, I'm going to make a lot of money myself. I'm going to, I am going to succeed and live a different life. I definitely was very shy. And like I said, never really had any conflict. And I feel like the thing that got me finally kind of out of my shell was sports. So
what grade did you finally start sports?
Yeah, well, actually I was thinking a little bit about it, and maybe actually the first thing that was helpful to me was church, which I kind of hate to say, but because again, it was kind of like a protected environment, and I found spaces in church sometimes where I could lead people, and I would speak. I would read a Bible verse or something, so it gave me some outlets early. But I didn't really start any sports until middle school. So that was really, and that was a big awakening. In middle school, I was just kind of like, what is this? And what am I doing? But by the time I got to high school, I found that I really had some good skills around supporting people and leading people and collaborate, teamwork and all that.
Which sports?
Stuff. Soccer, basketball, track, and golf, kind of. That was a bit of an anomaly. I wasn't bad. I wasn't good. I was kind of mediocre, but I got such joy seeing people thrive, and I found that I could really help them thrive, and so that was good. And so that, I think, formed a lot of my ability to do more than hide in my bedroom drawing houses and paper dolls. I will often collaborate with Claude, the Anthropic AI tool, to figure out how to do shows and stuff like that. And so I fed in like all of this information about our different backgrounds and all this kind of stuff. And Claude thought it would be fun to talk about some of our contrasts. And it suggested what it thought our decision-making styles were, our risk tolerance styles were, our communication patterns were. And so I thought we could take a look at those, Meg, and see, like, is this true? Like, this seems to be what Claude would expect and maybe what the world would expect, but is this actually true? So Claude thinks that Meg's risk tolerance is that she's comfortable with ambiguity and used to things changing based on her upbringing. And Amy's tolerance for risk is that she prefers calculated risks and structured approaches based on her very, kind of stable and secure upbringing. What do you think of that? Is that how you would portray our risk profiles?
I think it's a narrow slice of that. So I do think that, yes, I'm definitely comfortable with ambiguity and I'm used to change, and I don't find that off-putting. I think the piece that is missing from that is, for me with risk, is I am actually very thoughtful about downside, probably too thoughtful about downside. I see downside very quickly and I make a lot of calculations about, do I have a strategy for that downside? If not, is there a way out of it? If not, abort.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because like when I read it, I was like, oh, this isn't right at all. But I wasn't thinking about risk per se. I was actually thinking more about like planning and preparation.
Yes.
And I was like, this is completely wrong.
Right.
This is like exactly the opposite. But you're right. In terms of your your ability to manage things, you are very comfortable with ambiguity. Right. You are very comfortable with things changing. But in terms of how comfortable you are with planning, right?
Yes, and that gets to the downside, right?
Yeah.
So it's where I get neurotic is, I think probably the way Amy would think of it is if like I need to understand what the risks are and what my unique challenges that might show up, and at least intellectually understand that I have a plan for it. I can find a way through it, or I can navigate a way through it. And if I can't, or until I can, I will experience a lot of anxiety and stress.
Yeah.
100%.
And so like kind of tying this back to your upbringing, like, did you find when you were a child that you could prepare and plan for things that were going to be problematic, or?
Probably not as much as I wanted to. So I think that's one of the gifts I gave myself as being an adult. Like, I'm no longer vulnerable to somebody else's crap planning, because that was a big part of my life experience. Was I had very young parents. They did the best they could, but a lot of the choices were made optimizing for things that maybe weren't so great for me.
Right. So yeah, you saw a lot of things go badly.
Yes.
And you saw like poor preparation as the cause of those things going poorly.
Poor preparation and just bad judgment.
Yeah.
Terrible judgment. I mean, like, wow, that was just, yeah. When I launched to college, so one of the things going off to college on my own, I left, I was 16. When I graduated high school, I turned 17 right at the beginning of college starting. And I was just like, I felt so much relief that I no longer had to explain to the one side from the other side what was happening to me based on a decision I didn't have control over.
And then for me, I'm actually quite comfortable with kind of going with the flow because I have this background of like, it'll all work out, which is completely different. The people who were making decisions for me when I was a kid, it was fine. And then I would make my own decisions and they were fine and blah, blah, blah. At the end. I don't know. So yeah, so I would say
Well,
that
even when they weren't fine, you worked it out. Like that's what I always admire about you is you're sort of like, well, I'm good at figuring it out when something doesn't go right, so it doesn't matter. I just can't be that person because my definition of not going right is much more catastrophized, I think.
yeah, I mean, even like if I got like a bad grade on something, I'd just go in and talk to the teacher and fix it.
I was the queen of auditing every teacher's work. And I was right. I was almost always right on the edge, and my scholarship required me to keep a grade point average. And so, man, I'd look at the teacher that I had the least trust in their scoring, and I always was able to find a legitimate error when I audited there.
And then when I found a pattern of too many bad for me grades in college in engineering, I was like, time to get out of engineering.
Yeah.
This will all work out.
It'll all work out. Yes. I actually adore that. In fact, like, as you know, like half the time I'm like, okay, what would Amy Wilson do? You would assume this was going to work out. So I'm going to assume this will work out.
Yeah. You've learned a lot from me, Meg.
I have. I mean, we joke, but like seriously, you have taught me calm, and that is a real gift.
I'm learning to be more sensitive to planning a little bit ahead of time. Just as an example for our listeners. So we, when we have a guest on the show, we send them, a nice note before the show to like share, the different topics that we want to discuss and like how the show's going to go. And Meg was like, this needs to be 2 weeks ahead of time to give people enough preparation. And meanwhile, I'm like, nobody's going to read it until the night before. Do they really need it for more than a couple days before? So I think we've settled on a nice middle, which is about a week-ish before, So anyway, so thanks for coming my way, and you're welcome for coming my way. So here's what Claude said about our decision-making style. So let's see if this is correct. Meg, quick, intuitive, comfortable with incomplete information. Amy, systematic, collaborative, builds consensus.
Well, again, I think this is mostly right, but very contextual. If this is a decision that I'm making that is tied to a pattern that I have experienced before, thought of before, is within a mental model, all of this is completely right.
Well, and we talked about this a little bit with Dr. Ferguson, with Kirsten, right? In terms of your ability to kind of open up that, you might be wrong, or that you don't have all the information, being transparent about that. But like, again, how did you get to that based on your upbringing?
Well, it's hard to know because you've only ever lived your own self. So, I do think I try to tell people, like, everybody comes with a basket of gifts and a basket of, disasters that are your brain, your psyche, all of that sort of stuff. I do think the sort of quick and intuitive thing, I think that's kind of core to me. I think when you're little, people refer to you as bright or sharp or smart or whatever. And it really is that. Like I describe, I have a fast processor. I process information quickly. So I think that is just kind of core. The application of that and the confidence of that to make decisions I feel like I did have some leaps over my professional life where I got to a point and I'm like, oh, I'm comfortable in this, but not this. And then I'd get to this and I'm comfortable in this and not this. And also starting to realize, I'm just such a big fan of the Michelle Obama, when you realize that the people that you think have it all together oftentimes are, are just human and maybe not necessarily any sharper than you are. So somehow getting a sense to be able to calibrate what my decision process is. I have these moments where like I'll join a group and I will be like, I think this thing is important. And everybody will say, look at me like I'm crazy and ignore me. And literally like 2 years later, they'll be like, this thing is important. And, I've just had it happen enough times.
Meg, this thing is important. You should care about it.
I've had this happen enough times to realize that I actually see the patterns sooner than others. And that has its own basket of challenges because, that's how people get burned at the stake, quite frankly, right? So you need to figure out what to do with that. But at the same time, learning to trust that in myself and to say, okay, I still could be wrong, but I'm probably not.
For me, I think, yes, I'm definitely a much slower thinker, slower processor than you are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, well, that's how my parents were, but I also had time, I had a lot of time for that as a kid and so on. So, it never bit didn't me back.
Follow us for all the grammar tips, people.
But it's interesting, like talking about the collaboration and building consensus, because I do believe in collaboration and like so wholeheartedly, but at the same time, I also can be a little bit like this, this is my way, and again, like thinking about my, like the fact that I got to make all of the decisions other than the base ones around me. Like I didn't have to navigate other people other than my parents. I don't know.
So when Meg thinks something is wrong or stupid or whatever, Meg will say, this is wrong or stupid, or we should do this. When Amy thinks what you're doing is wrong or stupid, she will stop and look at you and go, well, that's it. That's the entire conversation. And then your job is to figure out, is that well, no, or is that well 40 degrees to the left, or is that well? Yeah. And so then Meg stops and says, well, then tell me what it is that we're doing.
That's probably more in my conflict avoidance
yes.
issues.
But I do think that sort of collaboration and conflict,
yeah.
Like they're correlated. Like you don't want to disappoint anybody, but actually you're never going to really change your mind for them. So it's
right. Yeah, I was definitely
I
was a pleaser growing up, for sure.
Yeah.
I was rewarded for being pleasing.
Right.
I was rewarded with
and that's
my
why
grades.
You're way more likable. Like, I mean,
so likable. Yeah.
When we first meet anyone, like it's so clear, Amy is way more likable, right?
I was pondering that a little bit too, because, in some of our like political navigations and so on, like you're much more likely to, stroke an ego than I was. And I realized, I think it's because I just assume I'm likable. And if somebody doesn't like me, I'm like, that's your problem.
Something's wrong with them. Yeah. Yeah. Which isn't wrong, but yeah. No.
But you are much better at like, again, maybe this is kind of back to like reading the vibes of people that are, of difficult people and like what they need in order for you to be able to survive around them. Whereas I didn't necessarily have that. So, I just was, I was always pleasing and likable. And so,
and there's also a certain subset of the population that really yearns for or values my quick responsiveness. It's a small subset, but I do notice that when people underestimate Amy, it's because they see me responding quickly and they're eager for that cadence.
Well, you've always been so kind to me in terms of letting me get a word in, though. So that's
well, after you kicked me under the table,
that's
and
true.
yeah.
Well, after we became cordial to each other through
Yes.
our lunch meetings, but yeah. But yeah, I don't know if I would have made it in this world if you hadn't like let me have my 3-second pause before answering.
Oh, definitely you would have made it. You would
I
have
don't
made it.
know.
But
I don't know.
But yeah, there are a subset of people, especially like when you're in those kind of executive tables that are not as comfortable with the length of pause that Amy is comfortable with.
Well, I
But
don't know if it's
a
comfortable
pause is a power move.
that I
So
require.
yeah, yeah. But a pause is a power move. So I think that's part of it. I think they perceive it as you taking a power move on them
Mm.
when you're quite literally just trying to, figure out is it bit or bite.
But I talked out loud there.
I
Like
know, I was so
I'm really
impressed.
expressing myself these
It's
days.
because you're comfortable with me.
Yeah. Communication patterns. Meg, direct, can handle conflict, reads subtext well.
I wonder how Claude figured that out,
I think
but
that's
okay.
pretty spot on.
Yeah,
Amy, diplomatic, builds psychological safety, inclusive.
100%. And I think that we got to that point of
Yeah.
like people adore Amy because she truly is genuine with them, and yeah, they feel it. Yeah.
And so are you. All right, so concluding question for this meaty topic. How do we help each other see our blind spots?
Well, first off, I think that we both feel deep trust from each other. And so we're able to hear things from each other that we probably couldn't hear from most people, because we know that if we bring it up, it's an important thing. And I think that's bigger than just blind spots. I think that's all feedback. I feel like when feedback comes from Amy, it's not only with my best interest in heart, but it also incorporates like my aspirational goals. Like I feel like you give me feedback not just about, yeah, you were kind of a dick there or whatever, which is, important, but also like, hey, Meg, your goal is X. Maybe you need to think this way. And so I think that is, that's something that is so important to have, that kind of trusted relationships. And I think that because of our backgrounds being different, like you can help me feel good about something that I don't innately feel comfortable with. You can help me get there because you can remind me that maybe it'll work out. Maybe it's not as bad as you're imagining. So
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is a little bit around protecting each other's hearts. Like we've
yes,
talked about like how you need to protect your own heart, but it's a real gift when you have a friend, a work partner, a colleague, whatever, who is also protecting your heart. Like
yeah,
that makes a huge difference. So, I'm going to come back to that, deal we struck or whatever, that, you gave me time to answer questions. And that was very generous of you. And, if you hadn't done that, I would have been like a ball of anxiety trying to answer ahead of when I was ready, or just, sinking so deep into my shell. It would have been a very difficult time in my career. And later on, I didn't need it as much, but at that time in my career, I needed it so much. And I could just tell that you felt that, and you cared so much to help me. So
one thing that I've observed about Amy in the blind spot, but it's not really, it's bigger than a blind spot. I didn't fully appreciate for a very long time how self-critical you could be, because you're so easily like everything's going to work out, and you're very light, in general. Your energy is very, very relaxed and sweet, and what you see is what you get. And so it took me a long time to realize that you had a little bit of a dark side inner monologue, where sometimes you assumed that other people saw you poorly, or that people were thinking negative things about you. And that just shocked the hell out of me, because it's so funny. For as much as I know I get on people's nerves, I don't spend any time worrying about it. I'm like, it's sort of like, well, that's just how it is. So I guess you just, do what you can.
I think
So,
honestly, it all stems to this one traumatic experience as a child. So,
ooh,
I was this shy only child. We had moved to a new neighborhood, and this was when I was 5 years old. And I just went walking down the street, and I saw a couple kids, and I went up to them and I said, "Hi." And they taunted me, and they said, "We have plums and you don't."
oh my God, kids are such dicks.
And then they stuck their tongues out at me. And then I ran home crying. And then I don't think I left my house again for a really long time.
God. Oh my God. Ah,
Yeah.
I want to go slap those kids.
I know. So, see, I do have a lot of grit, Meg.
Yes, totally. Those hardships are just adding up.
So
Yes.
much resilience.
Yes. But I would like to go back and slap them for you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I recently joined a rapidly scaling startup, and I'm building a completely new function from scratch, which means I'm simultaneously hiring a team of 7 people while delivering major projects and managing constant scope changes. What foundational elements should I prioritize to build a resilient team culture that can thrive in this kind of ambiguity and high-speed environment?
Well, first off, congratulations. That is an amazing opportunity, and definitely recognize that these are the kind of formative opportunities that not only unlock great futures, but also build your own understanding of what you're capable of. So those are all the good things. Of course, the terrifying things are there is no path. And so you are going to do what you do when you don't have a path, which is you're going to get started. You're going to try some things. You're going to learn some things. You're going to adjust. You're going to evolve. You're going to adapt, lather, rinse, repeat. So I love the fact that you're wanting to focus on culture, because I do think that that is the foundation. One of the important things of the culture that I would hope you would build is one that is to go back to Dr. Ferguson, one that's a seeker versus a knower, one that leaves space for the people that you hire to help you co-create what their functions need to be and how they need to grow and adapt, versus you showing up and having all of the answers. And I do think that as you hire, you really want to hire people that have skills and strengths that you do not, so that you can elevate yourself as part of the process. Because we really are the average of the people we spend our time with. And so getting people that are smarter than you, that know things you don't, that are willing to come in and co-create with you is going to be that unlock that creates not just this amazing function and showing the world what you're capable of, but will actually open doors for you in the future to step into even bigger roles over time. So don't think of this as you're building a final destination. Think of this as you're building the foundation building blocks for the future that is, as you rightly point out, is going to be adaptive and moving at a very rapid pace. So enjoy the ride.
I wanted to hone in a little bit on the team dynamics piece that you brought up, Meg. I think it's so important, and it can make such a difference in terms of both your satisfaction as a team member / manager of a team, as well as like how many outcomes you can create. And so, there's kind of these contrasting elements of, hey, you should hire people that, fit culturally, and, all share the same, values and this and that. And then on the other side, you should hire a diverse team where everyone has completely different perspectives. And those are, seen as two completely different choices. But I think that what Meg was getting at is that sweet spot in the middle, which is that you do want to identify people with different strengths and skills and perspectives. And at the same time, you want to ensure that all of those 7 people have, a shared vision and some shared values and some shared skills, like, the seeker, the ability to be adaptive, the ability to be curious, the ability to collaborate. So yes, good luck to you. It's going to be amazing. We're proud of you.
Yeah, you got this.
Are we going to be able to say goodbye today?
I think so.
I feel like we need a hug or something.
I know we do, and especially because it's been, we've been away from each other for a little bit.
Months. Yeah, it's been months.
Yeah. But I think it's worth mentioning, like, we're heading to the back half of the year where things really speed up, and I think we all kind of can get overwhelmed by it all. And so I guess as I'm reflecting in this moment, I really want to express gratitude for our community that we've built with the Meg and Amy show. I want to hopefully remind everyone to spread the word, and just to be thankful for who each of us are, because I think one of the things that this episode was really about for me is that there's just not one right way to be, and there's not one right answer. The important thing is to get clear within yourself of who you are and what your values are and how you're gonna contribute to make the world a better place. And with that, I implore us all to invent the future together. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.